Are you ready for a show that talks sports from the fans' point of view?
We've seen Michael Jordan score 37 points a game in his era. How many could he score in today's NBA?
There's not a player out there who I'd rather have than LeBron James.
Are you ready for a show that isn't afraid to challenge anyone when it comes to sports? If Adam Silver really wanted to fix tanking in the NBA, he would stop rewarding teams by giving them the best chance to win the draft lottery.
I mean, how many times will Roger Goodell drop the ball on handling domestic violence in the NFL?
Look, athletes have every right to talk politics, but if the fans stop tuning in, that's their right.
Then you're ready for Talk Back, a podcast where two fans debate the media narrative and discuss the world of sports as we see it.
Welcome to the show.
It's time for another edition of Talk Back. I'm one of your hosts, Eric Nesbit, and with me is Justin Gay, your host and director of content. Justin has a full lineup of content for this episode 241. But Justin, as I sit here with you, something's on my mind and I've got to get it off my chest.
Uh-oh.
And it's not even LeBron related. We'll talk about the Lakers sitting LeBron here later in the show. As I look at your show notes, I know that's part of the docket here tonight, but I want to talk about the death of Nipsey Hussle because there's something about it that's got me a little bit fired up. And here's what it is. Not that his life was any less valuable than anyone else's life. It looked like he was on the path to stardom. He was obviously Grammy nominated for his musical talents. He had a lot of relationships, and it sounds like a lot of projects going on with different celebrities and athletes around the Los Angeles scene. But Justin, it appears that he might have also had some ties, allegedly, to Rollin' 60s, a famous Crips gang out there in southern Los Angeles. So here's the problem that I have. After this tragedy happened, after he was senselessly murdered, and I will call it what it is, it was a murder. He did not deserve to die. There was a potential argument or something that happened outside of his clothing store that resulted in the perpetrator going home or going somewhere, retrieving a weapon, and then coming back and murdering Nipsey Hussle outside of his Los Angeles store. That's as we know it now. That's what the news is, at least breaking here the last couple of days. But the reaction in the sports world, since this is a sports podcast, let's talk about the reaction in the sports world, is all of this sadness and this, I can't believe it's happened and I can't believe he's gone. And Justin, I kind of just wanted to throw some things back and forth with you here in the teaser before we get the show started, because I can't help but notice the hypocrisy that goes on with some of these handgun violence issues versus the mass shootings and some of the issues that really fit the liberal narrative better. I don't really want to turn this political. I don't really want to turn this racial. I think there's things that could be said, whether it be about the racial aspects of these things, whether it be about the socioeconomic aspects, whether it be about the political aspects. We can talk about all of those things, but this is a sports podcast, so let's talk about how the athletes are reacting to this, acting how it's such a tragedy. They can't believe it. How could this happen? Rest in peace, Hussle. And those sentiments are understood, but it seems to me still hypocritical, because if this is a gentleman who lived his life a certain way in the past, is around and surrounded by people either currently in gangs in Los Angeles or had been in gangs, I don't know why this comes as a surprise. And so to me, what really throws me off and really bothers me is that those people on the left, meaning progressives or liberals or however you want to label them, mostly Democrats, they don't seem to have the outrage over some of these handgun crimes, really any of the handgun crimes. They are sad about them. They want to talk about, they can't believe this is going on, but there's no outrage. But then if someone shoots up a school, which is also an equal tragedy, there is this, oh my gosh, how are we going to get rid of guns in the world? How are we going to get rid of all of these assault rifles and everything else? Look, I'm not a gun owner in terms of assault rifles or semi-automatic weapons, but I am a legal gun owner of handguns. I'm not going to say how many or what kind, but I'm a legal gun owner. But I don't understand and maybe you can help me understand, Justin, or maybe you're on the same side of the fence as I am, that when you look at 2017 data, all of the 2018 data isn't finalized from anything I could find, but I looked at data even pulled from liberal-leaning websites like Vox and New York Times, and it all seems to state that 2017 was one of the most violent years in terms of gun deaths that the U.S. has had in over half a century. There's a lot of reasons that might be. Some of them are murder-suicides. A wide range of them are just suicides. And then a wide range of them are homicides. Justin, less than 1% of those are from assault rifle mass shootings. The rest of them are handgun, one-on-one crime. Now, we could sit here and again and argue how much of that is from different areas of socioeconomic class, different races, whatever. That's not really the point. The point is less than 1%. And yet everyone wants to be outraged about that. And nobody wants to be outraged about fixing handgun crime. They still want to be sad about it when it happens to one of their own. Why aren't they using their platform to invoke change in all areas of gun control instead of just the ones that fit their narrative from a convenient political perspective? That's my issue, Justin. Do you have anything to say on that?
No, I mean, we talk about it all the time on the show when it comes to sports where narratives get pushed, and we see it get pushed all the time with sports and athletes and certain teams. And it's the same when it comes to, it feels like this is where I get upset with athletes that talk about political issues or issues that are affecting the general population, because it feels like they're just reading from cue cards. And when these situations come up like this, then it's like they don't really know what to do. So then they look absolutely hypocritical. So we're going to worry about one event where 50 people tragically lose their lives and 5,000 where one or two lose their lives. We're just going to sweep under the rug and not talk about, not discuss. That becomes the issue. And we see it all the time with politics, and we see it in sports. Have you heard Colin Kaepernick come out and do any type of press conference or anything and talk about this? He talks about all the inequality that's out there. Well, why isn't this stuff being discussed? Why isn't what goes on in Chicago on basically a daily basis, or in DC? Why aren't those things being discussed? It just conveniently gets swept under the rug, and they wait for the next big event that happens where every single camera, every single media outlet is there, and it's a chance 4 or 5 minutes after the event happens to go right on Twitter and start pushing a political narrative. And what's funny is Veep just came back on HBO, and the first episode of this season basically is making fun of how mass shootings get used for different roles in politics. And if you watch the show, you'll know what I'm talking about, but that sort of takes it to a more of a parody comedy level of just how it gets used. It's a shame that that's what it comes to, and it's a shame that sports has fallen into that, but we talk about it all the time from a sports aspect. Athletes, coaches, owners, everybody gets entangled in political agendas. And then when things continue to happen and they're really not educated on it, they're just kind of reading from cue cards, or someone in their life is kind of giving them advice, but they don't really know what to say. Eric, they just basically come across as just sort of uninformed on the actual issue that's taking place, and not just on pushing someone else's agenda that follows a political view that they like.
Yeah, and here's the big thing. Criminals are going to be criminals, whether the laws are in place or not. And that's not a reason not to put laws in place, but it is something realistic to look at, in the sense that, I'll say it again, I own several handguns. I own several that could be concealed, size-wise and caliber-wise. I have permits to do that. I own my guns legally. Justin, do you know how many times I've had to register my guns with the state of Pennsylvania? Never, because once you buy it, it's yours. I have to pay $41 a year just to register the license plate on my vehicles. So I don't understand this whole narrative about, well, let's get these assault rifles. Nearly 40,000 people were involved in either suicide or murder-suicide last year. Do you think those are being done with assault rifles? No, those are being done with handguns. And whether they're registered or legal or not is irrelevant, because if you're going to commit a crime, you don't look at the law first and ask if you can do it or not. You just do it. And so I just feel like if they're going to push gun control, they need to push it all the way through. They can't just pick and choose and cherry pick and be sad about one of their own when they lose a liberal hotshot or celebrity without talking about the issue that's underlying. To me, it's completely hypocritical. I'm all for tougher gun control because I own mine legally. So I'm all for it. I don't care if I would have to pay $50 a year or $100 a year to own my guns because I'm interested in doing it legally. But these guys who want to break laws and want to murder people, let's not be super sad about it and have our platform be, oh, what a tragedy it is, unless you're going to go to that next step and be outraged about the unfairness of how these handguns are being used against people. I'm going to leave it at that because I'm going to get too fired up. And Justin, you have a great show lined up for us, but I had to get that off my chest because Talkback's on Instagram. Obviously, we're on Twitter. We look at all of these things, and it seemed like for 24 to 48 hours from a lot of the athletes that we follow, Justin, all we saw was tributes and rest in peace and everything else. And look, like I said, his life is valuable. Black lives matter, white lives matter, all lives matter, cop lives matter. I'm all for all that. His life is valuable. And so it is sad that he is gone. And it is sad that he was murdered because that wasn't equitable. That wasn't fair to him. He shouldn't have been murdered. But use that platform and go to the next step. Don't just be sad. Be outraged about what caused it. Russell Westbrook did a tribute in his own way. 20 points, 20 rebounds, 20 assists, I believe it was. And that was a tribute to the Rollin' 60s. 20 adds up to 60. And again, Rollin' 60s was allegedly one of the Crip gangs that Nipsey Hussle had in his past or potentially even in his present. So do we sit here and be outraged over the right things or the wrong things? I guess it's what you want the narrative to be. So on this episode of Talk Back, we're definitely going to get into March Madness in segment 1. We are now down to the Final Four, and we've got to discuss how we got there. Some shocking games, I would say, Justin, and some big injuries that could impact the Final Four as well. And then in segment 2, that's right, the Lakers are sitting LeBron James for the remainder of the season because they are out of the playoffs. We'll discuss that briefly. We also need to discuss who might be the Rookie of the Year in the NBA. This NBA rookie class, I think, Justin, was phenomenal, but you got to make a call who's going to be the top and receive that award. Then we're going to look at the Dell match play on the PGA Tour. Just a couple of interesting stories. We're not going to break down the whole bracket like we did in the NCAA March Madness. I don't think the listeners would be too interested in all of that, but there were a couple of stories that I think deserve a little bit of banter. And then finally, we'll wrap it up with the folding of the AAF. I got to admit, Justin, I didn't see it happening this fast. We had some positive things to say about the AAF just a few weeks ago. So this news kind of broke and hit me by surprise. We'll wrap up the show talking about that. We've got all of that and more on episode 241 of Talk Back.
All right, let's start the show off with some basketball talk. It's March Madness time, and we are closing in on the Final Four weekend here upcoming this Saturday. So let's take it back to this past weekend where Saturday and Sunday in the Elite Eight round, we had 4 really good basketball games. And Eric, this is something you and I talked about last week on the show. Of course, after the first weekend of the tournament, there was social media outrage of, oh, there's not a lot of upsets and not a lot of excitement. And we kind of spun it the opposite way where we said, look, you have a ton of teams that are in the top 20 and that have been in the top 20 really all season who are left in this group of 16. If things play out, we could get some really good basketball over the weekend, and that's exactly what we got. Every game was single digits. Every game was close. Had some upsets in there as well. So, Eric, what did you think of the slate of games this weekend?
I agree. I thought they were good games. I thought, you look at teams like Virginia who escaped a hot Purdue team. You look at a team like Auburn who I think made it a much further distance than either one of us thought they would based on what we thought UNC might do. And we'll talk about that here in just a minute, I would assume. Then you've got Texas Tech who took care of Gonzaga, and Michigan State, who took care of Duke. And I want to talk a little bit more about that situation as well. But when you're looking at the Elite Eight and, of course, the Sweet 16 and how we got there, I think we saw a lot of good games. And it really goes to show you that in college basketball, one of the basic things about March Madness that people absolutely love is that it's this one game, one moment, one time to shine, and you either get it done or you don't. And it's not always going to be the number one seed that moves on. So now as we get into this Final Four talk, The number 1 seed remaining is Virginia, and that's the number 1 seed out of maybe all of them that I didn't have there.